Well, it is the comedic portion of the evening. It says humor on the thing, right? Oh.
Can we open these?
Are these, can we open these? Yes. So, hi everybody. My name is John. Before we get started, all of our esteemed panelists have trick-or-treat bags because it is Halloween. Inside your inside your trick-or-treat bags, you will find candy and a question. And the questions might be a treat or a trick. You can tell us what they are. So before we dive into that, why don't we introduce ourselves? My name is John Palisano. I'm the moderator, writer, former president of the HWA. That's me.
My name is also John Palisano, which is kind of weird. No, I'm Gabino Iglesias, and does anybody read last week that like Skittles were being outlawed? And I just got a bag of Skittles. It feels very appropriate.
That's your introduction?
Yes.
Yes.
That's it.
I'm Owen Egerton. I'm a type 1 diabetic. And I
John?
and I write books and I write and direct horror movies.
All right.
I'm Josh Mallerman, and hi, my name is Clay, and I wrote a book called What Kind of Mother?
My name is Rachel Harrison, and I wrote a book called Black Sheep.
All right. All right, so for our first question, everybody has a question in their bag, so who wants to go first?
Got it.
You have a good one?
It's hard. I don't want to go. I don't want to go first.
Okay. So we can figure this out.
Not it.
Not you either?
I'll go.
All right. We have a winner.
Also, for the duration of this thing, we agreed that we are calling Rachel Queen. So please, when you direct your questions to
That
her,
didn't come from me. It started as a joke.
there are no jokes. This is a serious horror panel.
I'll take it.
Queen it is. So John started things very light with why do heartache and grief go so well with horror? Thank you, John.
Oh, you're welcome.
I'll have my Skittles later. Well, first of all, I think horror goes well with absolutely everything. You like your stories funny? Horror is a good dancing partner. You like them kinky? Horror is an absolutely gorgeous dancing partner. Philosophical, there's horror for you. You like crime? Horror works. I think at some point we started understanding horror as an aesthetic, as a way of life, as a feeling. And so it's no longer about haunted houses and demons and werewolves and ghosts and vampires. Sickness is horror, poverty is horror, racism, misogyny, homophobia, all of those awful things are also horrific and thus horror. So you can read a haunted house novel like I do because it feels like comfort food and it's entertaining and it makes you feel really great about yourself. But then when you think about horror, you think about watching a loved one waste away in a hospital. And I think that's why horror and grief and pain sort of mix together so well because it's technically the same aesthetic. I also feel like horror has always been a genre that is designed to make you feel stuff. And yeah, heartache and grief are two things that you feel. So horror just helps, you know, deliver those feelings.
Wow, that's beautiful. I love that.
Thank you, John.
You're welcome, John. My question was, when did you first fall in love with language? And it's nice because the O in love looks like a little butt. Oh, it's a heart. It's a heart. But that's very sweet.
We aim to deliver here.
Yeah.
Or I do.
So I was like, this is a great question. And I started thinking, like, well, when did I first fall in love with language? And I think I know. It was Shel Silverstone, like Where the Sidewalk Ends and all these books. But those early poems, specifically, I think for me, Where the Sidewalk Ends was the first one. And oh my gosh, I just love the rhythm of those poems. If you haven't read them in a while, if you only, go back, because they're brilliant. And there's a rhythm and a playfulness in the language, and there's a darkness to them. I mean, people are dying and getting eaten. I mean, even the very stories about a sidewalk that ends and you can just fall into oblivion, and all of that. As a kid, I was like, yeah, that, I want more of that. So I think that was sort of an early place for me. And we would read them out loud all the time. It was years before I heard Shel Silverstone read them himself. And he has his own wild way of reading those poems, which was different than the way, I guess, my first grade teacher read them. And that was a new experience as well. But I think that's early language love for me.
Do you remember there was one poem story about don't pick your nose, and the reason why you don't pick your nose is because there's a snail living up in your, and if you pick it, it's gonna
Yeah.
Like that was me. That was my, I remember that story and pure nightmare fuel.
Yeah. Terrifying, right?
Yeah.
I was always terrified of not taking the garbage out. And, Sarah Sylvia Stout, would not take the garbage out. Yeah, which is America.
I want to hear from everybody with these questions, by the way, too. It's not just, so if anybody else wants to answer these questions,
We can answer
please
his
do.
cool question.
Whatever you want.
Okay.
Well, okay, I'll throw my question out there.
Okay, cool.
How do humor and horror share DNA? A mother and a father kiss, and 9 months later, historic. No, I think humor and horror share a lot in common, and I think just. I think purely on a structural level, there is a wonderful, you can view horror as a joke. And I love the kind of structure of writing, whether it's something funny or something scary, that idea of there is the setup and then there is the punchline. And that in of itself is, there's a true kinship there between horror and humor, but also catharsis. There's such a catharsis to both humor and horror, where whether it's a laugh or a jolt, I think that you have to have that build up and that kind of sustained kind of it's the if you're on a roller coaster, it's the da 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 da, and then the punchline is the low woo, and I love that that can either be from a point of view of comedy or a point of view of horror, but it is a release, and that release is what readers come for. And the kind of masterful comedians or the masterful horror writers I think are the ones that are they kind of stretch out that build all the way up, and it's just and how long can you stretch that out before you give them the catharsis? And that catharsis becomes either 200 pages of the September House. The September House, has anyone read the September House?
Christopher Orlando.
Oh my God, that book was nothing but and I was reading it and I was like, what the hell? Is something gonna happen in this book? I was almost getting frustrated with it, where it was just come on, we're just building. And then last 40 pages of that book is just utter freak out. And I was like, oh my God, this is amazing. I was it was just Six Flags. This is that was just happy place. So, and it was almost funny. It was almost funny, how galling that the horror was.
Wes Craven says that horror is it pushes right up to comedy and then stops, which you can see in his stuff, right?
I mean, I think that's why Jordan Peele is such a masterful comedian and horror storyteller.
Funny that in film, there's only two genres where the writer or director can stand outside the theater, and based on the sound, the uncontrolled sound of the audience, they know if they're doing their job. It's either a scream or it's a laugh, and both are involuntary noises.
But if you're the horror filmmaker and you're like watching your movie and like you're like waiting for the audience. They're like, oh, here comes the scary part, and they start laughing. You're like, oh, like that's the maybe that's where humor and horror part. But you don't.
I don't know though, because if I'm trying to, sometimes the laugh is a coping mechanism for horror.
Yeah.
So sometimes when I'm scared or uncomfortable, I will laugh instead of scream.
I totally laugh. I'm a knee-jerk laugher.
Yeah.
Like it's like ha 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 ho.
Like if I woke up in the middle of the night and there was a murderer at the foot of my bed, I would probably start laughing. Be like, no way, really? Of course. And then that would be it. Okay, so this question. If horror is mainstream, why does it feel so personal?
Oh.
Ooh.
Wow.
And I think because it makes us feel so intensely. And so our reaction to horror is always going to be extremely personal. And how deeply we feel, whatever it makes us feel, is going to be specific to us. And how much it scares us, or how much it doesn't scare us, or however we react to it. It's an in-your-face genre. It's trying to make you feel something. So however you react is going to be specific to you and personal to you. And we can all watch the same horror movie and walk away from it, and I can be like, oh my gosh, that's the scariest thing I've ever seen. And you could be like, didn't get to me. It's just gonna, I think, be different for every person. So even if it's a mainstream, even if it's a blockbuster horror movie, like, I don't know, I really love Midsommar, but I know some people hate that movie, you know? But like, I also went through a bad breakup in my life, so I can be like, oh yeah. But if you didn't have that experience, maybe it's just like, what are these weird flower people? You know what I mean?
Right.
And also, it's kind of like, you feel like that book or that movie was made just for you.
Right.
Like, even if it is kind of like I mean, there've been so many conversations. I've had a conversation about you with your books that like, you know, I know you didn't write this for me, but I'm holding on to it as if it's mine. And like everybody here has their favorite horror book or their favorite horror movie. And you kind of latch on to that, and you never know what it's going to be and how it's going to hit. And it's just so different for everybody, but it's almost like it's yours. And whether you ever meet the author or the filmmaker, like,
Right.
it still feels like this is mine.
Yeah, maybe also going back to like that sound that it makes, right? That makes us either laugh or scream, or like you would, even when you're describing September House, laugh and scream at the same time, which your book does a lot, right? Those kind of moments. And, you know, it's a very intimate thing when someone makes us make a sound we didn't mean to make. I mean, this, you know, we're mainly grown-ups, but you know what I'm talking about. And that's a real intimate thing. Like it becomes part of us. We've had like this intimate, personal experience. And then I think the other thing is, even if we can't relate to being chased through the woods by someone wearing a hockey mask, we are all gonna die. And I remember spoiler, but I remember as a kid watching slasher movies and being like, so it doesn't matter how fast you run, because Jason can walk and he'll be in front of you. And it doesn't matter if you're smart or if you're good or if you deserve it or not. Every one of these people die. And when I realized that, I was like, so I better start living, because I've only got 90 or so minutes of screen time, you know, if I'm lucky. So like there is that sort of tapping into the most personal part of what it means to be alive, which is you will not always be alive, is without a doubt personal. So horror by nature is really, really intimate and personal.
Anybody else want to take that? What makes horror? No? Okay. I want to hear like how everybody fell in love with language. That was one I really was hoping to hear from everybody.
That's a cool question.
I know you answered it, but if we could get some answers from others, that'd be amazing.
Probably the same answer.
Probably.
No, I think I told this story here last year, so if you were last year, my apologies. We have a few good stories, and we recycle the crap out of them. I was taking one of my first English classes at school, and the teacher wanted us to write something in order to figure out where our skills were and, you know, how are your tenses and all that stuff. Do you know what a comma is? And I wrote a story about a lady in my neighborhood who had like this ugly, deformed, demonic baby, and put the baby in the basement. And then the baby just grew and grew, and one day he broke out and murdered everyone in the neighborhood. So my parents got called to school, and as you could imagine, and the lady did her little spiel on like the brutality of the murders and the big-headed baby murdering everyone. Obviously, I didn't know that you had to change names. I learned that later. So that was the reason why they got called, probably. But at the end of the lady's spiel, I'm like, my pops is gonna whoop my ass. And he looked at the lady and he said, okay, but was it well written? And at that point, I said, you could do whatever you want. And if you command language, for a lot of people, it's the only thing that's gonna matter. It's like brutality, fear, gore, humor. It doesn't matter as long as it's well done. So I'm gonna just read and read until I get good at language. And that was the moment. I was like, I need to go read some more so I could get to do whatever the hell I want.
Love it. That's really good. Love it.
I don't remember. I'm like, I don't know if I have an origin story. I always was a reader, and I always was a writer. Yeah, I'm very happy for you that you have such a great, compelling story, because I don't.
Rachel and I co-wrote that story. She doesn't want to tell you that.
I really don't remember. I mean, I always loved books, but I don't have like a memory where I was like, aha, language.
Eureka.
I'm from New Jersey, so like, I don't know. I can only be so good at language. You know what I'm saying?
Wow,
Hey.
you lured them in with, yes, cheer for me, and now I'm gonna out you.
And that's how humor works.
You just shivved half the audience.
Just,
I'm happy. Lots of Jersey people here.
I don't know if it's an origin story, but I realized I had a love for theater, love-hate relationship with theater growing up, and there was I kind of grew up around the era of the PS 122, which is this performance space 122 in New York, and there were certain artists like Eric Bogosian, Spalding Gray, Danny Hawk, and Laurie Anderson, who were just phenomenal, like because they took the written word and they brought it to the stage, and I just loved the kind of duality of text, that you could have something that was written that you could read to yourself, but given the fact that it's like a first-person narrative, or that it kind of like get an actor behind it, it becomes this kind of like elevated text, and then that made me look at like all these other Moby Dick, Call Me Ishmael, like that could be a monologue, that could be theater, and I just loved that like not only is the narrator kind of talking to you, the reader, but you could read that out loud, and all of a sudden it becomes something more. It just kind of like lifts off of the page, and I just love that. But there's one writer that I really have to call out, and her name is I, and it's spelled A-I, and she's this poet.
she's a great poet.
She's she changed my life. Like I read her in 9th grade. My drama teacher gave me, we were like read poetry out loud, like perform poetry. And my drama teacher gave me a copy of The Kid, which, I mean, like, I could just look at that poem and say, there was my life before that poem, and then there's my life after that poem. And I became a fan of her writing. Cruelty, Killing Floor, Greed, Vice. There's so many collections of her poetry that they're all first-person narrative, and they're like that big. They're that long, like barely even a page, barely even a stanza. But she's taking on personas, she's taking on points of view, and she's talking to you, the reader, and she's giving you some of the most brutal, like she is punching you in the face with poetry. And I read that, and I was like, I want to do what she is doing, and like I can't do what she did. It takes me 5-10 pages to kind of get like what she can do in like a stanza, and I'm just like, I will bow down at the altar of and I want to make all of you converts of her. And we're in a library, so hopefully we could go to the poetry section and find her, because she's amazing.
That's awesome. So everybody answered that question, right? We're good? Okay, cool. Do any of you want to answer each other's questions before we move on, if you remember them? Or ask each other these questions?
So where in Jersey do you live?
Well, you were like 9th grade. I was like, I thought we were doing like little kids. I was like, I could have, like 9th grade, I could have come up with a story, but I thought we were like going like deep cuts into childhood. And then you were like, when I was 14, and I was like, well, I remember
was
back
33.
that far. Yeah. Sorry.
Spray painting on the backside of the Safeway with my leather jacket.
Obviously.
That's a great segue to my next question. What was it like trick-or-treating in New Jersey? And do you have any funny stories? Seeing that we're supposed to be funny today.
Do I have
Or scary stories. Or heartache stories.
No, it was pretty generic. Nobody gave out like cigars or anything, if that's what you're trying to go for. It's very, I
wish people did.
wasn't living in an episode of The Sopranos. Like, it was just a very suburban childhood.
My parents used to, I lived in a small town in East Texas, and my parents lived on kind of a dark road. They didn't get a lot of trick-or-treaters, and one year my parents, who were doctors, gave out prunes, like individually packed prunes. And I was like, listen, you're nice people, but you're gonna get beat up, and I'm not gonna stop them, because then it's the wrong thing to give away.
Not gonna lie, I was a little disappointed. There's only Skittles in here. I appreciate the free candy, but there's not variety.
Sorry, the moderator was on a budget because he's a writer, starving writers.
I was like, ooh, candy.
You could trade them. That's the thing, right? We could trade
But
them.
we only all have Skittles.
I know. We have some people.
Yeah! Look at the generosity.
There we go.
Throw them back.
Interactive.
Actually, that's bad business. There's a signing after this thing. With the purchase of a book, you will get some Skittles today.
Skittles.
So,
You will get a Skittle.
One.
One Skittle.
One
but
per
it'll be
person.
signed. So.
Yeah.
I will say, so Halloween happens to be like my favorite holiday, and my family's favorite holiday. And we have like a little haunted trail around our house for trick-or-treaters in the neighborhood and stuff like that. And as a kid, I loved it too. Like as a teenager, I loved it because it was, I just wasn't a wild kid or anything, but like I love a space when things like that were once forbidden are now celebrated. It's a weird thing, but we don't think of as weird. If you imagine if you came from a country that didn't necessarily celebrate Halloween, you said, well, for 1 month a year, we hang up things that look like dead bodies. And we just do that. It's like, oh, to be scary? Well, yeah, but fun too. The children get in on it. And like, well, why are you putting, why are you dressed up in this scary thing? Oh, like this is a dead body whose body's no longer there, a ghost. here's the skeleton, which is the corpse that has been such a corpse for so long that all the flesh is rotted off. It's really fun. And I just kind of, and we have candy. And that mixture of the macabre and celebration and all of that, I just freaking love it. I love that sort of weird, and it is weird, and we don't no longer think about it weird, but I love that cocktail of strangeness, which is humor and horror all mixed up together. Halloween, long live Halloween.
Indeed. All right. All right. So why don't we'll use Eric LaRocca's question, and he's kind of like a force ghost over there now. So if we can imagine Eric's there, and everyone, I want everyone to like give a really long, thoughtful answer to this. Not kidding. Eric's question is, what is the best part of being a writer?
Fame, money, and power. Seriously, that's about it.
When it's working.
It works? Tell us more.
Rarely. Oh, all right. Mr. Stoker winner over there, like it works. Yeah. When I'm alone in my office and I'm writing something and it's working and I know that it's working, that is the best feeling in the world. That's the best part about being a writer.
Amazing.
For me.
Yeah, there's that kind of lower back tingle moment. Like you're at the computer and you're kind of working and like.
That's sciatica.
There's just like that, I feel like there's a moment where it's not like, oh yeah, but it's like, it's like a,
Those intimate sounds we were talking about.
No, but it's like, yeah, like, I don't know, like there's like a moment and it's just like, ooh, like, and you're not making that sound out loud, but it's like you're doing something with your body and you feel it. And like, it's gonna go away, the moment's gonna pass and you're gonna turn it into your editor and that moment, like they're gonna like change that moment. But like in the moment, like the moment that you're having that feeling, like it's like nothing's gonna take that feeling away. And maybe it's a little bit of an endorphin-y thing,
Yeah.
but it's like a
You gotta stop that, because the children's section is just up there.
and yeah.
That's a whole other panel.
But I'm with you. Like, it is that feeling, exactly. I mean, I have a weird thing that I really enjoy the feeling of. Like, if you're on a hill, like a mountain, and you run down, you know, I love that feeling of running down a hill with trees and rocks, and you have to kind of dodge things, and you're not fully in control, but you kind of are in control, but not fully. And the gravity is pulling you along, momentum is pulling you along, and you're having to jump and avoid things, but you're able to do it. You haven't fallen on your face yet. That's that working feeling for me. And it's like a thrill. It's a weird thing because it feels thrilling. For me, I remember when I first started writing, it's like, oh, this feels like being alive. This feels like being a part of the adventure. And it's a weird thing to think of writing as an adventure, but I totally feel that writing is an adventure. And other times it's a slog. Other times it's hitting your face against the wall. But those moments when you're making noises like claymate, and that's exciting. It feels, because you're getting lost and you're losing control. And by getting lost and losing control, you're finding something true, and that feels like being alive.
And
Thank you. Thank you.
and just to
Nice.
There's more where that came from.
And just to say, kind of on the other side of that, I think it's like it may be outside of writing, so it's kind of a bonus answer. But like, I actually think in a post-COVID kind of world, like meeting readers again, like actually like doing events like this and actually having conversations with people who, you know, I feel like there's a certain kind of privilege in being very fortunate to like meet people who have read your stuff and like having the ability, whether it's virtual or in person, like to have the communication to be like, I've read this thing that you've written and this is how I feel about it, positive or negative or otherwise, like maybe the positive, but like you could kind of connect with readers. Like that's amazing. That is like, I mean, I know when something lands for me with someone that I've read or something that I've seen, and I have that moment where I'm like, Mr., like, hello, I read your thing, and like, like it comes from this place, and they're like, oh, right, yeah, thank you, but like to be, have the moment on the other side of that, and it's just like, that's a gift.
Excellent.
I've experienced all that. If you feel the tingling sensation, you probably need to stretch. And the losing control, like I've overdone edibles in New York, and like unregulated edibles, and it's an experience. Don't edit if you're doing that, but feel free to write if you can find your way to a computer. It's a collection of things. Like we were having this conversation up there, like, dude, no guarantees and no 401k and no insurance. And at the same time, it's like, why did I struggle 14 years to do this? And then it's like, you go to an event and you talk to one or two readers, and they're like, dude, I had a nightmare because of your book. And then the other one will be like, if I go to Home Depot and I see bolt cutters, man, I think about you. And you're like, I live in your head. And that is the greatest honor that you can receive from someone. Like you wrote something, and when I was not reading it, I was thinking about it. And as a lifelong reader, you're like, I have so many stories that are in mine that just leave rent-free in my head. And I'm sitting at the airport and I'm thinking about them, and I watch a movie and I see the DNA of that story in that movie. And you just become, you're writing because you want to write. You're writing because you want to become a storyteller. You want to share the stuff that's in your head. And at some point, you do it long enough and you go at it hard enough, and suddenly you're floating along and you're like, this is storytelling. We did this by the fire as shiny ice looked out at us from the forest. And now I'm part of this like sacred river of storytellers. And at night, I go to bed and I don't care how much awful stuff and like child mutilation I wrote that day. I told a story, and I feel like that contributed one drop of water to that river. And I sleep like a baby, and that's glorious. And no job that I ever had gave me that. So, yeah,
It's beautiful.
thank you, John.
Lovely.
Like a big-headed baby in the basement.
How does horror help with heartache, both for the writer and the reader? Or does it?
Horror helps with everything. Horror is medicine. Horror is food for the soul. Horror makes you feel stuff. And there are things that you feel and you kind of want to die. And there are things that you feel, and those things, even if they hurt, they make you feel more alive and more in tune with the universe. And I think horror does that when it's done well. It does that better. I'm just gonna say it. Whatever your genre can do, horror can do better. So I'm sorry. That's why we mix them all, because they're all awesome. But I feel like horror does that better than any other genre. Like we're gonna put our finger in your wound, and you're gonna make clay sounds like ah, and that's a powerful thing.
Just gonna be over here every soundtrack. Do you think is there a grief rom-com? You're
asking the wrong panel.
Well, like there are grief rom-coms, right?
Yeah.
Like,
do you want to co-write?
What's that?
You want to co-author?
I'm just trying to if horror does all those things, like I'm curious, like do other genres do that? So Sleepless in Seattle, that was kind
That's
of
what I was thinking, Sleepless in Seattle, yeah.
Yeah. I'm curious, like, is there like, hey, we do it too? Like,
But I feel like horror lets you do the things that you're not allowed to do in real life. Like, for me, I cannot tear an animal apart with my bare hands, and I wouldn't want to, but I'm angry, and where can I be angry, and where can I channel my rage, and where can I take control of the things that have happened to me that I have no control over? I do it on the page. I do it in horror. I cannot, sometimes I want to be monstrous, but in my body, in my life, in this world, I cannot be monstrous in the way I need to cope with some of the things I've been through. But I can do it on the page, and I can roar on the page, and I can gnash my teeth on the page. I can't do that in real life. And if I did, I don't think people would take too kindly to it. So, but I can do it in a book, and then people can read that book, and people who also want to gnash their teeth can maybe get some catharsis out of it. So I think the things that you're not allowed to or supposed to do in real life, you can do in horror. You can Sleepless in Seattle in real life, and how sweet you'll be in, you know, love story, write up an article, whatever, it'll be sweet. But if you decimate an animal on a full moon, they probably won't be, aw. You know, so.
Have you had conversations with readers where they talk to you about having that connection? Like I read.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Not about them being like, I went out last night during the full moon and I went crazy, but about feeling like I see, because for me, like, I'm never writing about, like, Such Sharp Teeth is a werewolf book, but it's not about werewolves. It's about existing in a body. It's about assault. It's about body trauma. And some people will read the book and be like, oh, I really, like, there's a romance in it. It was cute. It was funny. And some people will read that book and be like, I saw what you were doing during that first werewolf attack. I know it wasn't a werewolf attack. And so I feel like in horror, you're allowed to layer these things. And it's also, you know, Neil Gaiman was talking about being vulnerable. For me, writing horror is a way that I can be vulnerable without, like, he was like walking naked through the street, and I'm like, layers. Like, I can keep my leather jacket on while I write horror, because I don't have to be honest about the thing that I'm actually writing about. I can be like, it's a werewolf attack. It's not a werewolf attack. But horror allows you to do those things and allows you to add those layers and keep your leather jacket on while still being vulnerable, and also have it work on different levels. Have it be like a fun werewolf book, but also have it be something more than that, that some readers can pick up and connect with. And if they can't relate to that experience, they can at least hopefully have fun with all the full moon teeth gnashing.
You know, it seems to me, I love everything you just said. Like, it seems to me like heartache and grief, they happen when we face, like, the world isn't like it should be, right? The person we love dies. Someone that shouldn't die, it dies. We get hurt by someone we trusted. There's a moment of trauma, and when we shouldn't have been traumatized. And the world as it should be is broken. And that's horror. Like, horror is filled with a world that doesn't play by the rules, right? People shouldn't turn into animals, but in horror they do, right? And people shouldn't live forever drinking blood, but in horror it does. And Michael Myers was shot 6 times and fell off the balcony, and he should be dead in the lawn, but when he looks again, he's gone, and he could be anywhere, right? And Jason keeps coming back. So horror is constantly saying, you know how the world doesn't act like it should act? We're gonna echo that back to you. And as horror fans, we go like, oh yeah, yes, this is more true than any fact, right? Michael Myers not dead makes more sense than actually if you fill a body with that many bullets off a balcony, then he's gonna be dead.
7 times! I shot him 7 times!
It was 6 times? It's a revolver, for God's sakes, Clay. Do your research. I'm sorry, everybody. but like I think there's a big thing with that, and I think this goes back to like Greek tragedy. Greek tragedy was the same thing of like it's just humans going, oh my God, the world doesn't make sense and it breaks my heart. How am I going to process this? How am I going to get the catharsis? And it's going to be like, well, I'm going to tell a really, really scary story or a really dirty joke, and
Or both.
or, yeah, or both, yeah. That's you,
Okay,
John.
so did you okay?
No.
Good, we're good. Bad news. I don't have any more questions. Uh-oh. But wait,
There's an audience.
there is. Why don't we play the game of this or that?
Oh, okay.
Woo, kind of fun. I know, fake you out. This or that, does everybody know how to play this or that? We give you
Yes.
2 options. Yes. I see groans, but okay. This or that, paper or digital, reading or writing?
Paper.
Paper.
Reading paper, writing digital.
Nice.
Same.
Okay. Well, that was fast.
If anyone from the audience has any questions for this panel, please come to this microphone. I see our first contestant.
Make it weird.
Oh,
Yeah.
You're here first.
Just curious, how does it feel to be a successful author versus what you thought it would be like when you were a kid?
Who is that one?
Yeah.
I saw Steven in the audience. Steven, you want to take this one?
I mean,
We don't know.
I think that might be your answer right there. Like, it's a weird thing because, like, there's a weird thing of like, this is actually, it's equivalent to writing a book, right? If you're starting at the bottom of writing a book, you're like, there's no way I can write a 600-page or 300-page book. I just can't. But then you realize, but I can write a page, and I can write 2 pages, and I can write 14 pages, and then you finally get there. By the end of finishing a book, you don't remember starting. That was way, way back. You can't see it from that point of view anymore. Like climbing a mountain, I can't get to the peak. I can't even see the peak from here, so you only experience the steps that you're on. And I think careers are kind of like that too. So like, I don't know, if you ask me, am I successful? I'm like, I don't know, no. I mean, this last thing didn't sell, and my last movie didn't do as well as I wanted it to do, and my agent is mad at me. So I don't know, right? It's only when I kind of like think back and like, oh yeah, I'm doing exactly what I wanted to be doing. But that was so far back at the bottom of the hill that I forget it sometimes. And it's a little bit what like Stephen and Neil were talking about last night so beautifully, that it is a struggle to remember to enjoy it and to take those moments and go like, oh yeah. And I actually think you said it so well. Getting to contribute a drop of story into the river of story, that's a real privilege.
He couldn't be here, so I'm going to send out a shout out to our brother Josh Matherman. When the book sold, when The Devil sold at auction, a 2-book deal, I had no one to call. No one knew in my life, my normal friends. Most of them don't even read. So I didn't know who to call, and I had a lot of stuff that I wanted to celebrate, and a lot of stuff that I had questions about, and I think I called Paul, who was here earlier, and I think he was busy. And I try not to bother Steven, because he's always writing a new novel. He writes like 2 a week. And I called Josh, and he picked up. And I was like, Josh, this happened. He was like, congratulations, dude. And I was like, yeah, but I feel like I've been struggling to get into the NBA for 14 years, and now I have to go in every single game and prove that I deserve to be here. And he's like, oh yeah, I've been thinking about making shirts. And, you know, being a professional writer is like this. Every single day you're like, hell yeah! Oh, fuck. And I feel like that encompasses like what it feels like on a daily basis. You're like, I get to do this. Oh my God, I gotta do this really well. And every day, day in, day out, you sit down, you write, you think it sucks. Next day, you delete it, you rewrite it, it's a little bit better. And then you're like, all right, I'm not in a cubicle. I get to do this. Let's add some more blood. And then you keep doing it day in and day out. And you kind of don't stop to think, I'm living the dream. Because if you do that for too long, then you stop hustling and then you die. Like a shark, you stop moving. So, yeah. Oh, yeah. So that. Good description.
So what I wanted to say was when you talked about
how horror affects us compared to maybe other genres. We live a life of constant grieving in every aspect of our life, whether it's your garden, whether it's a family member or a pet, whether it's a job, a friendship, something like that. So I think horror is really wonderful in that regard, because like what Rachel was saying, was it really kind of embodies what we all live every day, but kind of amplifies it. I'm going to shift gears for 1 second, because I just wanted to say that. There was a great movie recently on, I think, Amazon Prime, which was called Totally Killer. Okay. And it was funny and horror. And I'm just wondering if any of you have any sort of recommendations as to other movies.
Evil Dead 2.
Okay. That are funny and horrific.
It's a Wonderful Knife comes out, written by Michael Kennedy, the same guy which wrote Freaky, and that's coming out in just a couple of weeks, and that will be very much in that. And Happy Death Day, another great example of horror comedy. Tucker and Dale is brilliant. Sorry.
This goes back to what Rachel was discussing about that moment of catharsis in perhaps creating a violent scenario and then sharing it. I was thinking of something that the British author Angela Carter said. She said, horror fiction is a holiday from morality. And Ramsey Campbell quoted her and said, increasingly, I disagree. My question is, in that moment of catharsis, is it still important for you to impose a moral structure, or do you think it's equally important to just smash down all the gates and kind of let the moment, whatever the moment is, be the peak thing that you're talking about?
I think for me, it would depend on the character and the scenario. It depends on the story around it and what the narrative calls for. I am not opposed to leaving all morality at the door and going full bloodbath, and I love characters who make mistakes and do the wrong thing and who are just evil for the sake of being evil, because we live in a world where people are evil just because. But I don't know. What do you guys think?
I don't impose a moral structure. I think an emotional truth to the moment. Like if I'm understanding the question correctly, if it's a violent act or a moment of horror in the book, kind of perpetuated by particular characters, I think that if you can kind of justify or like emotionally ground the reason why that moment is happening, I feel like, you know, my characters tend to make a lot of mistakes and tend to not kind of have a moral structure or are losing their kind of morality. So I feel like but it's always coming from a place of like just trying to be honest to that character's trajectory, whether it's up or down or kind of more of a curlicue. But yeah, I think me as the author, I'm not trying to impose something upon that as much as just kind of watch that, like lead that character, help that character go through their own kind of personal journey.
I wonder too, like, you know, there's that Rumi quote, which is like, there's a field beyond good and evil, meet me there. And I kind of feel that way sometimes with a good story. I mean, I'll go back to the Michael Myers and the original Halloween. You know, it's not good or bad, but it's disorder versus order. And Michael Myers comes in and is chaos. He's an agent of chaos, and he's just screwing with a small little town and everything like that. And then Dr. Loomis comes in and reestablishes order, right? And we cheer. We want him to shoot him
7 times! I shot him 7 times!
But then when Michael Myers is not there, we are deliciously happy. Like we're chilled, but we want that because it's something beyond order and chaos. And the moral story would have been like, order's been put back into place and everything like that. But I don't actually think we feel that's true about the world. So it's different than good or bad or morality. I think those moments of awe beyond good and bad are what I go for in fiction, and what as a reader as well as a writer.
I feel like all narratives occupy two very separate spaces where it's like I read The Devil Takes You Home and it was so horrifying. I'm like, it's a book about 3 dudes trying to do the right thing. But then
It's just The Hangover.
they go out for ice cream after the whole thing is done, and live happily ever after. So it's really a romance. We do that to a certain extent with our characters, and we give them their own frame. But then there's the story as a whole, and I feel like I can't afford the lawyers to punch Ted Cruz in the face. So in my story, I'm gonna put these things that bother me personally, and that's gonna be part of the narrative. And I'm not gonna like shove it down your throat, but you know, here's a trans character. Why? Because trans people exist, because they deserve to exist, because they're around and they deserve to be. Here's a neurodivergent character. Why? I'm not like celebrating neurodivergence. I'm telling you, they're real, they exist, they're everywhere. So you should have those characters. So the characters have their own moral compass or lack thereof. And then you as a storyteller, you're like, these are the things that I want to talk about. These are the things that I really want to push forward. And that's why I get hate mail. And that's why I'm the king of woke. And that's why I'm, you know, I get all those ridiculous emails. Because I put someone in the story, it's like, there's child mutilation and there's evisceration by crocodile. But you're angry because there's a trans character. Good. Screw you. I'm gonna do it again. So I feel like it works on 2 different levels, and every writer does that, because I don't think I've ever read objective fiction, but if it exists, it probably sucks. So.
Hi, I just wanted to know, and Gabino, you spoke about this a little bit already. What's a horror, either supernatural or otherwise, that you've experienced that has inspired any story or writing, or have you written it in a version of it into a story already?
Oh, like something we've experienced in our lives?
Yes.
A very short answer. There's a piece that I wrote. It's non-fiction horror at the Tor Nightfire blog. It was published 2 years ago because in high school, it feels like a joke. I'm sorry, it's not a joke. I dated a woman who could see ghosts. So, yeah, that was an experience.
Nothing's made it into fiction yet.
Which is to say, you've had supernatural experiences?
Of course.
It's Jersey, dude.
Do you want to share one?
It's too long. I was a ghost in college.
You were experimenting.
Yeah, you know.
I've never had a supernatural experience. I've written about tonight. I've written about personal psychological things that have happened in my life that have kind of left their own kind of soft traumas, and writing about those and maybe layering it up with something more supernatural. But the personal kind of historical stuff rather than, I've never had a ghost moment. That would be, I wish.
I wrote a movie called The Axe Murders of Villisca, based on a real murder that took place. You probably know about it, where a family of 4 and 2 guests in this small little farmhouse were murdered with the flat side of an axe, all in their beds. This was over 100 years ago. And I wrote the first draft for this director and this producer, and they said, great, we're gonna do a note session. And surprise, we're gonna do the note session while spending the night in the house where the murders took place, which meant to be haunted. I'm like, oh. And so I flew up there, and I was kind of freaking out a little bit, because these characters that have been, in my mind, kind of characters, fictional. It's like, oh, this is where they lived, and they died. I was like, oh, this is kind of chilling. And I was like expecting the ghost hunters would go to this place all the time. They'd been ghost hunters the night before, and they had left like little machines that like make a noise if there's a ghost around. And I was like, oh. But through the night, I was like, okay, let's be really serious about these characters, these people, and their experience. And although you weren't meant to, I went up and slept in one of the kids' rooms, and I just slept there all night. I was like, okay, if I'm gonna write about it, I'm gonna be here. And nothing happened the whole night, and I was fine. I was a little scared. It was really good conversations. I think the script got better for it. It was only in the morning as we were leaving, like, phew, no ghosts. And all of a sudden, that little machine went, and I ran upstairs into this machine that's glowing. I'm like, oh, and then it just, I'm like, that was the end.
This is for Rachel. I listened to a podcast interview you did recently, and I'm wondering if you've had any run-ins with garden gnomes recently.
Damn. No, but I regret admitting that on a podcast. I have a phobia of garden gnomes. And I went on Talking Scared with Neil McRobert. And Neil always asks at the end, what truly scares you? And I'd been on his podcast before, and I think I said something like death, or like, and I didn't want to give the same answer, end on that no, wah, wah, no. So I said, I have a very authentic, real fear of, I don't like gnomes. And I know now, inevitably, someone's going to show up somewhere with a gnome, and I'm going to
Because no,
freak out.
like you.
It's funny. I get that it's funny, but it's real. I don't.
Do we have any Rachel Harrison fans in the house? Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yes. Can we do? What's your next event?
I'm not
You're gonna
saying.
be. You're gonna be at the. I know you're
I'm
gonna
not-
go.
you're not
You're
gonna-
gonna be upstate New York on Tuesday.
I'm gonna be nowhere.
And then on Thursday, are you appearing at the Strand Bookstore at 7 p.m.? Would it be just awful if somebody here came?
You're laughing now, but
I can
when
put
I
a
start to
Westport
cry, you're all gonna
logo.
feel like real jerks.
What would you do? What would you have? Like, would you like?
Okay.
Would you be like, or would you
I
be
don't
like?
like it. I don't like it.
Well, on that
come alive
note,
when you're not
I'm going to
looking.
put Rachel out of her misery because you guys have been so fantastic. Let's
Thank you.
give them a
Thank you.
round.
Thank you.
That was horror
Now-
and heartache and humor right there.
And just so everybody in the audience knows, we have copies of all their books and Eric LaRocca's books in the Kamansky room for you to purchase and get signed. Remember, tonight, Eric LaRocca is premiering his new play. So if you haven't gotten tickets yet, you can do that now, too.